Hey everybody, welcome to episode 311 of The Virtual Couch. I am your host, Tony Overbay. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist, certified mindful habit coach, writer, speaker, husband, father of four, ultramarathon runner, and creator of The Path Back, an online pornography recovery program that is helping all kinds of people turn away from unhealthy coping mechanisms for the voids in their lives, turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms like pornography. So if you're hoping to put that behind you, if you're hoping to be the best version of you that you can ever be, and turn away from feeling like you need to cope when you don't feel as connected in your marriage, in your parenting, your health, your faith, your career, then head over to pathbackrecovery.com, and there you will find a short ebook that describes 5 myths that people believe when they are trying to put some unhealthy coping mechanism like pornography behind them once and for all. So again, pathbackrecovery.com, and go to tonyoverbay.com and shoot me a note through the contact form if you are interested in hearing more about my magnetic marriage course. My buddy and good friend Preston Pugmire and I have ran 3 rounds of the magnetic marriage course up to this point, and I have no qualms in saying that our course is amazing. It really is. It's the way to communicate. If you've heard me talk about my 4 pillars of a connected conversation, we go so big on the 4 pillars and a framework to communicate that I feel very, very confident in this. In the last 2 rounds, actually all 3 rounds, when we have made the card available or open, it sold out relatively quickly. So head over to tonyoverbay.com, shoot me a note there if you are interested. We'll get you on the wait list. And then I am going to be talking quite a bit more about this on my podcast, on this podcast, most likely on my Waking Up to Narcissism podcast as well. And if you follow me on social media, whether it's through Facebook at Tony Overbay Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist, or on the Virtual Couch Instagram account, you're going to hear more about it because Preston and I continue to revamp and develop the course, and it is something that I'm very proud of and excited to offer because it will change your marriage. It really will. So let's get to today's topic though. Today I am going to talk about marriage advice. And I will often be asked through when I go speak of hey, as a marriage therapist, what are some tips that you can offer newlyweds? And here's why this is just something that is in the forefront of my mind right now. And ironically, it does have to do with my 4 pillars of a connected conversation. So I really feel like people don't know that they need certain tools until they have gone through something and they have to go and find tools. So I realize that people that are coming in to see me as a marriage therapist, and I still see 15, 20 couples a week as part of my regular practice, that they don't just want to check in and pay somebody to say, I think we're doing okay. And typically it's when there's been something like betrayal, or when people feel like they are at the verge of divorce, or people just feel like they don't know how else to be heard or seen or understood, then often it's fine. We'll go see somebody. We'll go see a marriage therapist. And in that case, then when the people are coming into my office, sitting on my couch, then you've got people that either don't know what they don't know, which I am convinced that we do not have the tools naturally to be able to communicate effectively in a relationship because we bring all of our own stuff into the marriage. All of our versions of what we thought marriage would be, the way that we were parented, our hopes and dreams, our expectations, our relationships with money and our relationships with sex, the way that we parent, that they're all coming from a place that we somewhat assume that there's this global belief of how these things operate in a relationship. So then we show up in a marriage, and then we are both playing this game of somewhat enmeshment or codependency, where we're trying to make sure that we don't say the wrong thing that will frighten this partner away, because at our core, we really want to connect with somebody. And I say so often that the concept of abandonment is programmed into our DNA, that abandonment equals death. So when we are starting to get into a relationship, we're just trying to make sure that we don't say anything dumb, and this person then will find out some deep, dark secret about who we are, and that they will go running away. So it can seem as subtle as somebody saying, hey, do you like the new Batman movie that's out right now? And you can watch someone say, they can kind of say, I don't know, what'd you think? Where if at their core, they absolutely couldn't stand the movie, but they feel like, well, if I go big and tell them I can't stand it, this person might think, what, are you a lunatic? It was the greatest movie in the world. Absolutely, our relationship is not going to work. So even in as low charged topics as what movie do you like, or what kind of food do you like, or where do you want to vacation, we're still playing this game of where, I don't know, what do you think? You tell me what you think first. And I noticed that in adult relationships about some of the most trivial topics where someone just says, well, you go first. I don't know. You tell me what you think. Not trying to get political or anything like this, but I witnessed a conversation not too long ago with a couple of people that I really care about, where they were talking about being vaccinated or not being vaccinated. And one of them said, well, what are your thoughts on it? And the other person said, well, you go first. And I was just sitting back as the observer, but I thought it was really fascinating that neither one of them wanted to just say their opinion. And they had two completely different opinions, which was very interesting. And so if we can't talk about even low charge topics without trying to figure out what's the best way to present myself, then it's going to be really difficult to talk about high charge topics. And as a matter of fact, in my magnetic marriage course, I talk about these high charge topics are the things like parenting, religion, finances, sex and intimacy, and politics. I was going to say, I think there's 5 that I typically go to that are the high charge topics. So we just don't have those tools or those skills from the factory. So I'm often asked, hey, what's the best advice that you can give someone in a marriage or in a relationship? And it really would be to just, if you could learn the tools before you have to find the tools to communicate more effectively, if you could learn how to deal with tension in a relationship, because we're so afraid that it's going to go to contention that we avoid tension altogether, then that would just be amazing. But that is going to be something you're going to hear more about as I ramp up to my next round of the magnetic marriage course. So today I really wanted to just give some just generic marriage advice, and I'll comment a little bit on that. I am recording this one in video, so if you are a YouTube person, then please go to my YouTube channel, Virtual Couch, and please hit the subscribe button. That would be amazing, and you can catch the video there. So here we go. I actually jotted down marriage tips, marriage advice. Why 11? Because I had 10, and then I thought of one this morning, and I inserted that one actually into number 2 so that it would just liven things up a bit. So the first thing, go to bed, and not with the go to bed if you know what I mean. This is go to bed because so many stories happen when it's late and people are tired. And by stories, I think that's a nice way for me to say arguments and disagreements. I can't tell you how often someone says, well, and then we were up until all hours of the night and we couldn't come to any sort of a resolution. We couldn't be heard. We couldn't be understood. And finally, I just had to go to bed. And so at that point, I said, look, I can't do this anymore. And so I feel like when people just get emotionally overwhelmed or physically exhausted, that is a combination that does not lead to a connected conversation or any type of productive communication. So just on this one, on the rest, I'm going to just give you my thoughts and opinions. On this one, I actually pulled up a little bit of data. I happen to have a couple that was coming in that struggles with this. Actually, most of my couples, if I'm the ones that are really trying to communicate more or they've had an unhealthy pattern of communication, there's typically this component where they don't have an opportunity to communicate until late at night. And so at that point, if there's some stress from the day or overall sleep deprivation from the week because of kids or work schedules or that sort of thing, that they do go in trying to communicate and it's a little bit too late at night. So I'm pulled from an article. This is actually, it's from stylist.co.uk. So we're going across the pond here. But I liked it. It said lack of sleep effects. Why do we get more emotional when we're tired? And this was written by Lauren. And I'm going to jump down a little bit here where she's shared an example of where she's tried to communicate more effectively and when she's tired and it doesn't work well. But she pulled some research from a place called Benson for Beds, and she says 87% of people say tiredness makes them intolerant, with 1 in 5, or 18% roughly, saying they constantly disagree with their partner because they feel exhausted. And some 15% of people also said they feel their personality changes when they're tired, and more than a fifth confess that they swear under their breath at everything when they're lacking sleep. And this article came out about a year ago, and so they refer to a lot of the struggles with lockdown or with the pandemic. But I want to refer to, this is why I enjoyed this article, Stylist spoke to sleep expert Dr. Sophie Bostock to find out more, including how a lack of sleep has the potential to impact our mental health. So she said that, why do we get so emotional when we're tired? We've established that everything gets a bit more trying when we're feeling low on energy, but what is actually going on in our brains to make us feel this way? And Dr. Bostock said, to make sense of this, it's worth thinking back 200,000 years ago when our early humans were living out on the savannah. Dr. Bostock said, in those days, what would have kept us awake? Predators, storms, hunger, threats to survival. And so our brains have evolved to interpret sleep deprivation as a potentially dangerous situation. The amygdala, which is part of the brain which switches on the fight or flight or freeze stress response, therefore gets more sensitive. So she said this means that we become much more emotional, and then even small problems feel more stressful. And because our amygdala is more sensitive when we're feeling tired, and we're therefore more likely to have our stress response activated, she said that a lack of sleep can also have a physical impact on our body. And this is because when the fight or flight response is triggered, hormones flood through our body to help us respond to the thing that we've identified as a threat. So she says the stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, increase our heart rate, our blood pressure, and our blood flow to our muscles. And over time, a lack of sleep is linked to an increased risk of high blood pressure, heart disease, and even early mortality. So the first thing that I can suggest then is please go to bed. And I remember when my wife and I were married, we had one of those, just a kindly person that was giving us marriage advice as they were marrying us. And they said, never go to bed angry, work things out. And I lived by that for so long. But I think that was when my wife and I, just everything was just, we were going to make the best of everything. That we were so afraid of contention without even knowing that we would avoid tension altogether. So at some point, one of us would just acquiesce and say, no, you're right. And then we would go to bed and we would think, well, that worked okay. But I often say now in my marriage therapy, does okay mean that we just didn't make things worse? Or is it that we actually had a real connection through a conversation? And I think so often when people say that, no, things are going pretty well, it's because there's an absence of things going bad. So that first one, go to bed. And oftentimes we wake up and we feel more refreshed, and something that seemed so high charged the night before isn't as big of a deal. And I think that research by Dr. Bostock makes so much sense there, because when we are in this heightened fight or flight state and we view that this argument, we view this with far more emotion, and we view this disagreement as more of this conflict, or it just will feel so much bigger at night when we are sleep deprived. So I'm not saying ignore it the next day and just, hey, if they don't say anything, I don't say anything. It's quite the opposite. This is where I feel like being able to have a framework, my 4 pillars of a connected conversation, is absolutely necessary to even go in and talk about things that have passed, or even conversations that didn't go well. Number 2, this is the one that I added because I thought about this morning. I watched a TikTok video not too long ago. It was actually quite a while ago. And the cutest, most adorable little girl was talking about that one of her friends at class was a bucket dipper. And I think she was pointing her thumb down, a bucket dipper. And I loved that concept. I assumed I knew what it meant, but I had to go look it up. And I found a Psychology Today article. And this is by Marvin Knettel, and it says the story of the dipper and the bucket. And he just says the easiest way to fill your bucket is to fill someone else's bucket. There's a really simple principle here, but he said the story of the dipper and the bucket originated in the 1960s when a gentleman named Dr. Donald Clifton, a psychologist and founder of the Clifton Strength School in Lincoln, Nebraska. He said in every booth of King's Restaurant in Nebraska was a small card containing the story of the dipper and the bucket. And such a simple idea made a great deal of sense, he said to so many people. So the dipper and the bucket. Recently, he said, someone told me your presentation to our group was very meaningful. And he said that one short sentence validated me. That simple sentence filled my bucket. On the other hand, if that person would have said, your presentation was interesting, but it's too bad you ignored the research of Dr. Smith, he said that comment would have emptied my bucket. And here's the concept. The easiest way to fill your bucket is to fill someone else's bucket. The unyielding secret of the bucket and the dipper is that when you fill another's bucket, it does not take anything out of your own bucket. That is gold at that point, because I feel like so often we have this scarcity mindset of compliments or of praise. And so we often feel this either or, this all or nothing, this black or white, this cognitive distortion that if for some reason we compliment someone else, then that means that we then have less compliments that are coming our way. But you don't, when you fill someone else's bucket, it does not take from your bucket. So don't be a bucket dipper. Number 3, tension is okay. So I've already alluded to this, but we're so afraid of contention that we avoid tension altogether. But it is okay to be a little more vulnerable. And ways to do that are to talk about a movie or a show or an opinion that you may not actually feel comfortable sharing, or you may not have felt comfortable sharing in the past. I give an example of a few years ago when I was really starting to understand this calm, confident energy was the way I referred to it. And where with a lot of people, we are so afraid then of things going to contention that we avoid even stating our opinions about even the most simple things. And the most simple thing in this case was the movie Dumb and Dumber. And I remember being around my family. It was around Christmas time. I think TNT, one of those networks, was running it over and over. And we were just together. I think we were playing a card game, board game. All my family was in town. And someone said, "What do you want to watch?" And I said, "Oh, I like that movie. I like Dumb and Dumber." And I remember a couple of my kids, I think my older kids, looked at me and thought, "Wow, I didn't know you liked that, Dad. And that's a pretty silly movie." And I remember in that moment feeling like, they're gonna attack me. They're gonna tell me that I can't believe you like this just very silly movie. And so I remember just feeling like, this feels a little tense, as simple as that is. And so rather than me just saying, "Yeah, you're right, it's kind of dumb. I don't know why I want to watch that. I don't know what I'm saying." Instead, I just said, "Oh yeah, no, I think it's really funny." And I remember at that moment too, calling a timeout. Maybe this is where it's not as fun to have a therapist as a dad or as a spouse. And I just said, "Hey, can I just ask you guys, let me check in. What does this feel like right now with me saying that I actually do enjoy that movie?" And I believe it was my wife at the time said, "It sounds like you're being a little aggressive." And I thought, that is so unfortunate, because I feel like I'm just leaning in or stating my opinion, and that oftentimes I feel like if someone disagrees with us, then we take that disagreement as if they're telling us that we've done something wrong, or we take a disagreement as criticism, when in reality it is perfectly normal for us to have different opinions, because we're going to like different things based on all of the things that we bring to the table, all of the things that we've been through. And so I enjoy a silly movie, absolutely, and I know that there are things that other people enjoy that I do not, and that is perfectly okay. So be okay with the tension. And one of the ways to test that is to be able to start to speak your opinion. It's interesting. I even wanted to say right then to stand up for yourself. But we feel like in order to have a different opinion, we often have to just show up big. We have to, I'm puffing up my chest right now. I'm deepening my voice. And we feel like instead of just saying, "Oh, I disagree," or "I have a different opinion," we feel like we often have to build some case in order to make our point, when in reality, we are all entitled to have a different opinion about something. Okay, so that was the third one. Tension is okay. The fourth one is really understanding empathy, or try your best to understand that concept of empathy. And remember that there's a difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is saying, "I'm so sorry, that would be really difficult." Empathy is saying, "What is that like for you? Tell me about your experience." And even within that, I feel it's so important to understand it is impossible to have perfect empathy for someone else, because that would require that you have literally been that person, that you have been through every experience that they've gone through, to know at that very moment that you can completely and absolutely understand, which no one can. There are even, and I pulled up a couple of these, but I was too much of a digression, I think, but you can find some fascinating studies done on twins, where twins will view the same, they will view some scenario. So they're getting the same input, and these are identical twins that share so many of these common DNA, but then they are asked to then write out what their experiences, what they just saw, and I want to say of course, but of course then they have two different views of actually what they even took in, even though they just had the same input of data, but then their output is going to be different, because it's all of their own processing of things throughout their life that cause them to pay more attention to some things than others, or to have different opinions about the significance of certain things versus others. So while I believe it is absolutely important to be empathetic, or to do your best to say, "Tell me more about that," and to understand that that would be hard, that what people go through in their life is difficult. And my 4 pillars, so I'm alluding to this in this episode, and I've talked about it in so many other episodes, but that first pillar of a connected conversation is to assume good intentions, or there's a reason why people do or say the things that they do. And it's because of all of the experiences that that person's gone through. That second pillar is more of this mindset, or this just something to be aware of, that I can't tell somebody that they're wrong, or I don't believe them, even if in my experience I feel like they are wrong, or it's hard for me to understand or believe what they're saying. And that leads to pillar 3, which is asking questions before making comments. And then pillar 4, not going into a victim mode and staying present, staying out of my bunker. And the reason why I feel like those pillars are so important is they do set the stage to have empathy. If you hear often, if you're the spouse that hears often that let's say your wife says, "I just feel like you just fly off the handle. I feel like you just get so angry with me, and I feel like you raise your voice all the time." That if I feel like I've been working on not raising my voice for literally years. And I've been meditating and I've been noticing, I've been being praised at work, or even my kids have said that, wow, you seem a lot more calm, Dad. But then if your wife then says, I feel like you just, again, fly off the handle and you just start yelling, then instead of me taking that as criticism, I need to assume good intentions. There's a reason why that she's saying that. And the second pillar, then I can't just say that's ridiculous, even again, if I feel like it is. And that third pillar would be, okay, hey, tell me more about that. Help me see my blind spots. Help me understand. I would love for you to point out those times when I've done that, or point out those times that I do that moving forward. And then that fourth pillar, where that guy would not just say, okay, well, you're the tone police then. I just want you to tell me if I'm talking okay. Maybe we can go get a decibel meter, because that's going into victim mode and wanting my spouse to then rescue me. But the beauty of those four pillars is that empathy. That would be really hard if my spouse feels like that I'm constantly yelling or I'm flying off the handle. And if that is how they feel, then I want to express empathy for them. I want to say, I can't imagine what that would feel like if you feel like your spouse is constantly just yelling. And that would be really hard. So I appreciate you sharing that. But then in this world of four pillars, then after I have validated that person's experience and they feel heard and understood, absolutely, then I can then say, but I feel like I've been working on it. Or I know maybe I haven't made you aware of the fact that I've been taking courses on tone management. But if you feel like that's still the case, then I can understand why that would be frustrating. So that concept of empathy is absolutely something that has to be learned. It really does. And as a matter of fact, I've had someone recently come in with their Myers-Briggs personality test, and it showed that they scored a little bit lower on empathy than on some other areas of their personality. And I loved that awareness, because the person was able to take ownership and accountability and say, maybe I don't understand what empathy is. Maybe I have a hard time really trying to put myself in someone else's shoes. And so they've been very vulnerable about that, and we've been working on that. And this is a little bit of a time to, I think, introduce a plug, an ad, and that would be, if you are someone who struggles with empathy, or someone who really is trying to understand your spouse more, and you feel like it is something that you just don't have the tools or skills for, that maybe it is time to go seek help or find a therapist, a counselor. And right now it can be very, very hard to find a therapist or a counselor. And if that's the case, do please give the world of online therapy a try and go to betterhelp.com/virtualcouch. You get 10% off your first month's treatment. They have a pretty amazing assessment process and intake process, and they'll match you with a licensed counselor who can then communicate with you through text or email or video chat. And so I really feel like we all owe it to ourselves to bump up that emotional baseline. And if you need to see somebody, if you're dealing with anxiety, depression, OCD, if just the real spiraling negative thoughts or any of those kind of things, then talk to somebody. So whether you find somebody local that you can go see, or if you want to try the world of online counseling, then try betterhelp.com/virtualcouch. Okay, number 5. This is a topic that I need to do an entire podcast on. Marriage tip number 5 is change your relationship with intimacy. And I will tell you, it's been pretty long ago, because I believe it was in the early days of starting the podcast. So 5 years, I was on the verge of having an opportunity to possibly participate in a TEDx talk. And so I really would, if you are anyone out there that is coordinating TED Talks, then give me a shout, because there was one that was going to happen in our area. And I can't blame it on the pandemic. I think the TEDx group in the area fell apart. But I have this message that I felt passionate about at the time, and I've alluded to it in a couple of podcasts, but I have so much more I want to share about this. But in essence, it's our relationship with intimacy, with physical intimacy, with sex. And the more that I was starting to see couples, and here was the way things would play out often. I'm going to just go with the traditional model, where I would see the husband look at me and say things like, when I'm happy, I really think we should celebrate with sex. Or if I'm sad, then nothing is quite a pick-me-up like sex. And if I feel like a cold is coming on, then there's nothing like sex to help me feel better. And then they look at me almost as if to say, hey, so can you then explain that to my wife? Because I've sure tried. And after hearing that dozens and dozens, if not 100 times or more, then I feel like I would look over to the wife and just say, okay, what are you hearing? And she would say something to the effect of, well, I'm hearing I am responsible for his happiness, and it all revolves around whether or not I want to have sex with him. And so in those scenarios, I would often then say, okay, now's a chance to reestablish that relationship with intimacy. That I would then find the wives in this scenario would often say, okay, I have started to pull away or withdraw because I feel like if we make eye contact while we're brushing our teeth, then he's going to think, oh, tonight's the night. Or he may be very nice and helping with the kids and cleaning up the house and picking up toys and washing the dishes because there's still a chance that we might have sex tonight. But then if one of the kids ends up getting sick or staying up late, or one of the kids gets angry when I'm trying to help them with their homework, then I almost can watch him go through this pouting where he thinks, okay, I guess we're not going to have sex tonight, so then what's the point? And then he kind of goes off and does his own thing. Even to the point where during that time I said I would share some of this with my wife, and I would say, that's crazy, right? And I still remember she said, oh, you kind of do that. And I thought, are you crazy? I'm the therapist. I'm very aware of these things. But she said that it wasn't that after there was intimacy that then I would kick the family pet or that sort of thing. But it would seem that I was far more in tune or attentive. And then even when intimacy happened, then it wasn't that I was mean, that I maybe wasn't as engaged. So that led to a time that and I know I podcasted about this a few times, where then I would say, hey, look, I'm helping out around the house and I'm not even anticipating intimacy, anything like that, which I don't think was probably the ideal way to communicate that as well. But changing the relationship with intimacy so that you can then allow more of a physical connection where it can be more of it's hugging, it's kissing, it's playful, touching, it's massaging, those sort of things. Without that, is this going to lead to sex? So reestablishing that relationship with intimacy so that you both can feel more comfortable just being around each other, whether it's just holding hands, whether it's just laying each other's laps, whether it's just sharing more of these intimate moments without it meaning that it has to go to sex. So I think having those conversations is something that's very, very important to change that relationship with intimacy. And it's interesting because I remember at the time too, when I would have this conversation with people, and it was almost as if the guy would look at me and say, okay, gotcha. If I do this for, what do I gotta do? It's like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then will we end up having more sex? And then I would say, okay, we're kind of missing the point there. If you have more of a connect, then that is actually going to be something that is going to be far more fulfilling, is to feel like I can communicate more with my spouse or partner, spend more time, and there isn't always this vibe in the air or this energy of, okay, what's going to happen? And then, because then once, if it feels like it's not going to happen, then people then become disappointed, they pout, and then that is actually what can eventually create this dynamic where people have a pity sex or transactional sex or just intimacy, so that then he will then not pout, or that then he will be nicer to the kids or that sort of thing. So changing that relationship with intimacy is a very important part of the marriage, I believe, and then having the tools to be able to communicate about that is absolutely necessary as well. All right, please, number 6, own up to your mistakes. This is where I've done many podcasts about accountability, and I just say nothing diffuses a situation faster than saying, my bad. And this is the emotional immaturity. This is the whole concept that I talk about over on my Waking Up the Narcissism podcast so often, is that we're all, in essence, emotionally immature until we are aware, until we can work on our emotional maturity. One of the key traits of emotional immaturity is that when anyone disagrees or even has a different opinion, or there's even a shift in the energy there, that we take that as criticism. So if my wife says, again, we'll go back to this just silly example of, do you really like that movie? Do you really like Dumb and Dumber? That if in my emotional immature state, if I view that she's saying that that's ridiculous, or I view it as criticism, then our brain is wired to go back to this place of shame where she's saying, wait, if she's saying that I'm a horrible husband or a bad father because I like what I like. And then when we go to this emotionally immature response, when we feel like someone has attacked our sensibilities, then we go to great lengths to protect our fragile ego. That's where the concepts of things like gaslighting come from, or where people they get big and angry, or they withdraw. That instead of staying present and saying, oh yeah, I do like that movie, then instead people go to these unhealthy ways to communicate, where then they say, you like dumb movies too, or well, what about those Jane Austen movies you like? I don't like those. And so we're defending our fragile ego rather than leaning into a conversation and with curiosity. And so that same concept happens with the world of accountability. That if I did something, if I forgot to call someone that I'm supposed to call, instead of saying, well, you don't always follow through on your stuff either, that is so emotionally immature. The emotional mature thing is to say, man, my bad, I totally forgot. And it is liberating. It is empowering. I feel like I go through this every day, where my wife and I will have a combined task list about things that are going on with the family, and I will have certain responsibilities or things that I need to follow through on, and I will forget. I'm a human being, and so when I forget, then the best thing I can do is to say, I forgot. instead of saying, oh man, yeah, meant to call them and they didn't get back to me. And I find that we almost do that stuff impulsively, when in reality, instead of saying, oh, I forgot, I need to write myself a note, or I will call them, instead of saying, yeah, I called them, they never got back to me. Heaven forbid then if my wife ever one day said, oh, can I see your call log? Not that she would do that, but I feel like, is it really worth that for me to just, instead of saying, yeah, I forgot to call, I need to do that. I need to write myself a note. And I love it. I love that my wife will say, did you write a note? And instead of me saying, how dare you question me in writing my notes? Because how many times do I not write the note? Often. So that's where I will appreciate her, and I will then say, no, you know what, let me do that real quick. And so taking ownership or accountability is, again, marriage advice. That would be an amazing thing to do from the start, or if you haven't been doing that, jump in and start doing that. Number 7, ask more questions. I remember this so well. I say the floor is open for questions. And I remember working with a couple. I can think of the person right this very moment, and it's a couple's session, and I wasn't as confident with my couple's skills at this time, and so that's why I remember the significance of this moment of going pretty big when the husband said he was telling me that he tries to tell stories. She wants to know about his day, which I love, but he said, so I say, fine, I'll tell her about my day, but then she keeps interrupting me with more questions. And he looks at me like, can you believe that? And I remember having this moment thinking, how dare she? I mean, is that what you want me to say? Or how about, wow, what an opportunity to connect and what an opportunity to communicate. So if he is saying, and he was saying this at the time, he was saying, okay, I will tell you, but I want no interruptions, and I don't want you to ask me again because I'm already telling you one time. So you need to pay attention. And I just think, just listen to the negativity or the energy that is in there. Is that a way to drive a communication? Is that a way to drive a relationship forward? Absolutely not. So with my wife, I will say, and I will say this over and over again because I worry that this wasn't the person I was the first 10, 15 years of our marriage, where I know that there were times where I probably put off that same vibe, but we've got a whole life into the eternities here to communicate. So we got time. So if she's saying, oh, okay, sorry, I wasn't following. Can I ask a quick question? Then I want to say, absolutely you can. The floor is open for questions. And in the world of my 4 pillars, which is based off of emotionally focused therapy for couples, EFT, I often talk about flow. That if we are starting to have a conversation about something, and I give this example that was another couple that was in my office a long time ago, but he was starting to tell a story about our dream. I think he was talking about a dream, and he talked about a dream, and he talked about it having, there was a bus in the dream. And the wife just said, oh, hey, can I ask what kind of bus? And in that scenario, the husband acted a little bit put off or offended. He just said, and I remember saying, this is an opportunity to connect. Yeah. And I look at the wife and I said, what are you, take me on your train of thought. And she said, when I think of bus, I'm thinking of my parents used to send me across country in a Greyhound. So are we talking about a Greyhound bus? Because if so, I've got this different view. And the husband said, oh man, no, I was thinking of a yellow school bus. And then just that simple exchange, then she was able to say, oh, okay, thank you. And I just thought that's flow. And we need to be able to feel like we can ask questions, and that it isn't someone trying to derail the conversation, it's somebody seeking connection. And so that's my number 7 marriage tip is feel free to ask questions. The floor is open for questions. And if you are somebody who says, look, I already told you, and that means if the person didn't hear or understand, that means they're human. And I guarantee there are times where you are the one that has said, oh, sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Can you tell me? So I don't know why we should expect that everyone else, when I speak, is going to hang on my every word. Because that is emotionally immature and absolutely not fair. Number 8, try not to listen to things, read things, do things with your elbow. And this is something that Preston Pugmire and I talk about in our magnetic marriage course right out of the gate, is how often do you listen to a podcast or read a talk or an article with your elbow? And doing this on the YouTube video here, just pointing, elbowing your partner saying, huh, did you hear that? I think you would really benefit from hearing that. That is not a way to drive connection. If you feel like that would be something that you would love to share with your spouse, then absolutely feel free to share it. But that doesn't mean that if I'm going to share this article, it's not coming from this place of, hey, you better listen to this because this applies to you. But I feel like if you are someone that feels like that connected, an article, a podcast resonated with you, then it's absolutely okay to say, hey, I really liked this podcast, and so I wanted to share it with you. And again, going back to emotional maturity, I can think right now of podcasts or articles or things that I've shared in our family group chat with my kids, where in the past I would follow up and say, hey, nobody's talking about this thing that I said you need to listen to. What's up with that? And versus, hey, this is something I can offer out to my family that I think is important, but if somebody decides not to listen to it, That's okay. They're not doing that to hurt me. It's just something that I want to put out there, and I have to be able to do that without reciprocity, without feeling like, okay, then they better listen to it. Because I know that there are plenty of times where somebody, I don't feel like I have the time to or energy to put into something that somebody's saying. I think that you would benefit from this. I was driving home last night, and someone had sent me a week ago something that they thought I would really enjoy, and I didn't really want to listen to my audiobook. I didn't have a podcast that was handy. And so I went to click on this thing that they had offered up, and it turns out that it was audio through Twitter. I think they call it Twitter Spaces, and I couldn't get it to work. I felt like a technology challenged old man for a little bit. But I remember just feeling, oh man, this is a lot of effort. But then I felt like if I don't do this, then I'm going to let this person down. And it's just interesting to see the internal battle that we can have, where in reality, I ended up figuring it out, listened to it for a few minutes, and then absolutely forgot about it again now that I think about that on my way into work today. But it's okay to have these expectations that it would be ideal. I would love for somebody that I care about to listen to something that I thought was enjoyable, but then they may run into technical difficulties as well. And that doesn't mean that they don't care about you. It just means that life happens. So number 9, try to be present with your partner. And I think this one can be a real challenge today. This is where, again, I'll pull a old man, get off my lawn moment. But try your best to be present, to make eye contact. If you need to hold your partner's hand, or I almost feel like this is where I'm trying gingerly to say, you might need to set your phone down, whether it's with your kids or with your spouse. And I'm not trying to say this to bring shame or guilt to anyone, but I feel like over time, we just start to develop these patterns. And even we convince ourselves that I can still listen, I can multitask, I can listen, I'm just going to text while you tell me. But I feel like in a perfect world, if I really need to finish a text, then the emotional mature response would be to say, hey, can you just give me 30 seconds, or let me just finish up this text because I want to give you my attention. Or if the person is more important, and I feel like, if I'm being honest, this is something I try to do with my kids, and I've tried to do as long as I can, that is any text really more important than I've got a kid here in front of me that wants to share something with me. So I feel like it's very empowering for a parent to make sure that then they set that phone down, and then they give their kid their full attention, and they don't act like, okay, hurry, get to it, I've got stuff I have to do. Because you'll have plenty of time to send texts and that sort of thing. And I feel like I'm almost about to get emotional and have a moment here, as my youngest is 18 and graduating high school. So it does become that thing where, I would give anything for them to be coming home and having these conversations late at night and that sort of thing. Truly take advantage of those moments and be present. And if that means putting your phone down, then probably a good idea to put your phone down. Okay, that was number 8. That was actually number 9 or 8, 9. I don't remember. And I'm going to be very authentic here, but I know that I have 2 more on here. So pause before speaking or before reacting. And this is what a mindfulness practice will allow you to do. Building that pause in is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And in the world of emotionally focused therapy, and I pulled this out again yesterday on literally, it's a book called Emotionally Focused Therapy for Couples for Dummies. I think that's a long title. But it was so powerful because it talks about how our emotions run about 2.5 times faster than our thoughts or our logic. And so we often get caught up in this, I can absolutely control my thoughts, that it's a choice, a conscious choice. I'm going to choose to be happy today, which sounds amazing. And again, if this works for somebody, then that is great. But I feel like this is one of those principles that works until it doesn't. Because if I am waking up in the morning and I am going to make this the best day of my life, and I'm going to be happy, I'm exercising, I laid out all my clothes, I ate right, and I'm on my way to work, and now I get caught in a traffic jam, then my emotion is operating at 2.5 times the speed of my logic. So I may then emote or immediately go to this visceral reaction of, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Why is the traffic so bad today? And then what do we get to do? Now we get to beat ourselves up because we had an emotion. We had a natural human emotion. And now we beat ourselves up because we say, oh my gosh, I can't even control my thoughts. I can't even decide to be happy and then be happy. Instead, I'm frustrated, or my emotion serves a purpose because we naturally just have this reaction because we're a human being. And that part is there to protect us. It's our gut reaction. It's our visceral reaction. And this is where, if you have ever been walking around outside and you look down on the ground and you see a stick, but it looks somewhat like a snake, so you recoil a little bit, take a little breath and say, okay, it's just a stick. That's a miracle. That is why telling ourselves that we can control our thoughts is adorable, and it's something that we can start to be able to build this pause so that we can notice the reaction within us and then take action on a value or something that matters. And that is in the world of acceptance and commitment therapy. I think I've done 2 or 3 episodes talking around the data, the science behind that. That if you are asking yourself to suddenly flip and get rid of your visceral reaction, your gut reaction, I don't want that to happen, because our emotional or visceral reaction is there to protect us. But then we can build in this pause to be able to then notice that and then take action and do something that matters or something of value. So try your best to build that pause in. The best we can do that is a daily mindfulness practice. Over time, it starts to build in that pause, that I'm noticing that I am thinking, I'm noticing that I am feeling, instead of I just reacted. So giving that pause is just an amazing thing. The last thing, so this is number 10, do not be too cool to have fun, to play, to embarrass yourself. Not embarrass your spouse, but yourself. That in order to be able to just be fully present, you're going to experience a wide range of human emotions. And some of those are going to be embarrassment, they're going to be laughter, they're going to be fun, they're going to be fear, they're going to be all the different emotions. And be present, feel them. And there is nothing, I feel like, more empowering than just enjoying life or being silly or that sort of thing to your spouse, but especially to your kids or those around you. This is where I feel like letting yourself be human absolutely liberates others around you. And when I've noticed before that when I feel like I can crack a joke or self-deprecating humor or tell a story about I just was speaking somewhere recently and I told a story again about being down at a very fancy hotel in LA back in my computer days and not having the USA Today paper outside of my door. I still don't understand why, but the place across did. So I thought I was just going to grab that one, and I walk out in just my underwear bottoms, and then I heard the latch of the door close behind me, and I spent the next 15 minutes out in the hallway in my underwear as I had to call the people at the front desk to come up and get me. So is that an embarrassing story? Absolutely. Did I live through it? Yes, I did. Am I human? Yes. Yes, I am. And so being able to take ownership of those stories, share those, we're all human, and just to be able to look at things with humor and curiosity is just such an amazing part of the human experience. Okay, hey, we're gonna call it a day right now, but I so appreciate you joining me today on the virtual couch. Hopefully some of these marriage tips resonated. If you are interested in finding out more about the Magnetic Marriage course, then head over to tonyoverbay.com, go to the contact form, and just shoot me an email. I'll shoot you a quick note back, and we'll get you on the wait list, and then you'll be hearing about that more. But I am just truly grateful for the podcast has hit another bit of growth, and that has been fun to watch the statistics go up and the number of places that it's shared and the countries and that sort of thing. So I absolutely appreciate every single person who listens, who downloads, who forwards, who rates, who reviews, and I'm truly grateful. So taking us out today, as per usual, is the wonderful, the talented Aurora Florence with her song, It's Wonderful. All right, everybody, have an amazing day, and I will see you next time on the Virtual Couch.